Have you ever felt invisible, overlooked in your pain, abandoned in a wilderness of despair? In those moments, it's easy to wonder if anyone truly sees you. But what if I told you there's a name for God that promises He does? El Roi, the God who sees me. This isn't just a title, it's a lifeline from the pages of the Bible. Today we're diving into the story of Hagar in Genesis 16, a tale of an outcast woman who discovered God's watchful eye in her darkest hour. Join me as we uncover how El Roi changes everything for her and for us. Our story begins thousands of years ago in the ancient land of Canaan, during the time of Abraham and Sarai, then known as Abram and Sarai. They were nomads, promised by God to become a great nation, but years passed without a child. The promise of God still hung over Abram's tent like a banner faded by time. Each sunrise was another reminder of prayers unanswered, of prophecy postponed. Sarai's hope, once fierce and shining, had cooled into a quiet, aching practicality. Every promise of God still glimmered like a distant star, visible but unreachable. Sarai's tent had long known the hollow quiet of a woman without a child. She had prayed, wept, reasoned, until hope began to ache more than despair. If the promise would not come through her, then perhaps it would come through another. At last, in a moment of weary resolve, Sarai turned to her Egyptian servant, Hagar, a young woman brought from Pharaoh's palace years before, faithful and obedient.
"The Lord has kept me from having children,"
she told Abram.
"Go, sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can build a family through her."
Abram agreed, reluctantly, and the arrangement was made. Time passed, and soon Hagar carried within her the very thing Sarai had longed for, the spark of new life, a promise growing beneath her heart. But with that life came a shifting of power. The girl who once bowed low now lifted her head a little higher. What had been humility turned to pride, and what had been desperation turned to envy. When Sarai saw it, her old wounds reopened with fury.
"You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering,"
she cried to Abram.
"I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me."
Abram's answer was weary and evasive. "Your servant is in your hands," he said quietly. "Do with her whatever you think best." And Sarai, the woman of promise, became the wielder of harshness. Hagar, once treasured for what she could bear, was now burdened beyond endurance. The desert wind outside the tents seemed kinder than the words spoken inside them. So one dawn, before the camp stirred, Hagar rose. She wrapped her linen veil tight against the cold, took a skin of water, and stepped into the wilderness, alone. Each footfall into the sand was a heartbeat of defiance and fear. She did not know where the road would lead, only that staying had become impossible. Out there, under the same sun that had watched Sarai's tears, a different story was beginning, one not of human schemes, but of divine compassion. The God of Abram was about to reveal himself, not in the comfort of tents, but in the silence of the desert. The desert stretched around her like a vast, breathing silence. Wind lifted the sand in tired curls, and the sun burned down with pitiless clarity. Each step Hagar took grew lighter, emptier. She had no plan, only motion, away from pain, away from Sarai, away from everyone who had ever commanded her. Finally, exhaustion drove her to a spring beside the road that led to Shur, the path toward Egypt, toward the only home she had once known. She knelt beside the water, cupped her trembling hands, and drank. The sound of running water was the only voice left in that wilderness. Then another voice broke the silence. Calm, clear, close. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? Her heart leapt. How did this stranger know her name? The question held both authority and tenderness, as if the speaker already knew the answer, but wanted her to speak it aloud. "I'm running away," she said softly, eyes fixed on the water, "from my mistress, Sarai." The figure before her was no mere man. There was a depth in his presence, a weight of gentleness that stilled the air. The angel of the Lord spoke again, words that cut through her fear and wrapped it in purpose. "Return to your mistress and submit to her," he said, not as a command alone, but as promise. "I will increase your descendants so that they will be too numerous to count." She swallowed hard, lowering her gaze. She thought to herself, "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai." She expected rebuke, or at least indifference, but the voice that answered held neither. "Go back to your mistress," he said quietly, "and submit to her." The words struck her first like a stone, then softened into something deeper. Go back? To the place where she was despised? Yet within the command was a promise, a woven certainty that this was not surrender to cruelty, but surrender within a greater care. The voice that spoke was not sending her back alone. "I will increase your descendants so greatly that they will be too numerous to count." Her eyes widened. This was no ordinary traveler. This was the angel of the Lord, bearing the language of divine covenant. It was a promise vast enough to eclipse her shame, a word of abundance spoken into barrenness, of legacy whispered to one who owned nothing. In the wilderness where no one pursued her, heaven itself had found her. The God of Abram, the God of covenant, was now the God of Hagar too. The voice of the angel carried through the dry air like cool water reaching thirsty ground. "Hagar," he said, and her name sounded different now. No longer an order, but a recognition. "You are with child. You will be giving birth to a son." Her hand went instinctively to her belly, as if the words themselves awakened the life inside her. The messenger continued, "You shall name him Ishmael, God hears, for the Lord has heard of your misery." The meaning settled on her like a shade in the noonday heat. God had not only seen her flight, he had listened to her cries echo against the emptiness. Every sob, every whispered plea that no one else had heeded had reached heaven. In that single name, Ishmael, her pain was remembered, not erased. Her sorrow was acknowledged, not ignored. And the child she carried would forever carry that testament that the Lord listens to the lowly, that no wilderness silence is beyond his hearing. The ancient names of God often begin with El, the Hebrew word simply meaning God. But each name pairs that root with another word, a window into his character. So when Hagar calls him El Roi, she isn't just identifying a God, she's proclaiming who this God is, the God who sees me. That second word, Roi, comes from the Hebrew Roi, which can mean to see, to look, to gaze upon, or even shepherd. It paints a picture not of a distant deity observing from beyond the stars, but of a watchful, caring presence, like a shepherd, keeping careful eyes on every wandering lamb. When Hagar fled into the desert, she had every reason to believe she was invisible, alone, pregnant, unwanted, forgotten. Yet in that wilderness, she discovered that God had been watching all along, not with judgment, but with compassion. His gaze didn't expose her to shame, it brought her back to hope. That's what El Roi means to us today, when we feel unseen, unvalued, or lost in our own wilderness. He still sees. He witnesses our exhaustion, our questions, our silent prayers, and He moves toward us, just as He did toward Hagar. Jesus would echo this same truth centuries later when He pointed to the simplest of creatures. Look at the birds of the air. Your heavenly Father feeds them. If God's attention is tender enough to rest on a sparrow, how much more does His gaze rest on the ones made in His image, on you and me, in our greatest time of need? El Roi, the God who sees, the shepherd who never looks away.